Hi, everyone. I'm just going to take a second to get my screen shared. All right, can everyone see this? Perfect. So, hi, everyone. Welcome to the August 29th, 2024 meeting of the Gilman Square City Redevelopment Parcels Civic Advisory Committee, or CAC. My name is Ben Demers. I'm a senior planner in economic development with the city, and I use he, him pronouns. A quick note about the housekeeping item. So we are conducting this evening's public meeting through Zoom. Note that because of guidance from the state around what is called side conversation, the chat function amongst folks has been disabled. So you will not find access to that this evening. But if anybody who's joining from the public wants to make any comment, please just use the raise your hand function. We have sort of set times throughout the meeting for public comment, but also if you want to make a comment on any of the matters that CAC members are discussing, we can always take that comment at that time. So please just use the raise your hand function, and then I will call on people. And usually we ask that people make their comment within about 2 to 3 minutes. Yeah, so I'm going to run through the agenda for this evening's meeting. So we'll start with a quick roll call and the approval of the previous meeting summary from our June meeting. We'll then have a first public comment period. So this is just if anybody has something they want to put on the agenda or have at the start of the meeting. Generally try to keep this a little bit shorter. We're then going to do an update on the temporary activation of city-owned land in Gilman Square. So this is the Gilman pop-up space on the Homans lot that I know CAC members have all been to. Members of the community, if you're tuning in, many I know have gone to. So kind of get an update on what's next. And then we'll turn to the drafting and review of the letter for the Somerville Redevelopment Authority regarding urban renewal. So this is building on conversations from the last couple of meetings. And then we'll also leave time for neighborhood updates from CAC members, and we'll leave time for a second public comment period before we adjourn. Do CAC members have any questions or anything that they want to add to this agenda? Well, generally seeing nods. I want to just take a moment to make sure I'm not missing anyone in the attendees tab. Okay, perfect. So I will start with a roll call vote. So when I say your name, please just say here. I know I can see everyone, but it's just helpful for the process. So Diana Marsh.
Here.
Perfect. Melinda.
Here.
Ron. I don't think has been able to join us yet. I sent an email. Okay. Jack Lister, as I mentioned, is not able to join. He had a conflict come up today. Jamie.
Here.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Here.
And then Michelle also let me know that she has a conflict. Ben.
Here.
And Councillor Klingon.
Present.
And then Councillor Ewan Campen is not able to join. And then did CAC members have a chance to review the meeting summary that I sent around? Were there any notes or anything that people wanted to edit before it's posted to the website? Okay. Just gonna make a note of this. So with that, I'm going to shift us into our first public comment period, but we currently do not have any members of the public with us. So again, I'm not sure if are people okay to wait until sort of the substantive agenda items to talk on those topics, or there's nothing else people want to add. Cool. Great. With that, we can shift into our first substantive item. Moving things around on my screen a little bit. Just give me 1 second. So the first item is an update on the temporary activation of city-owned land in Gilman Square. So I know everyone on this call knows this, but just sort of for the record, I like to recontextualize the site a bit. So Gilman pop-up space. This is a partnership between the city and Culture House to activate a portion of 350 Medford Street in Gilman Square. This is the lot that's commonly known as the Homan's lot, a portion of which is also used for teacher parking, and then the back portion along the MBTA tracks, which is used for DPW storage. So this is a site that had a building on it until 2019, and then was used for construction laydown for the construction of the Green Line station in Gilman Square. And that was returned to the city from the MBTA in May of 2023. And so in the past year, the city has worked with, really the past 6 months, the city has been working with Culture House, which is a local placemaking and design firm, to sort of activate that space. And so obviously, we've talked a bit in the past meetings about sort of what the events have looked like. The past month has continued to see a lot of great events on that space. So the continuation of the vintage market and the beer garden. Also seeing, more movie nights, comedy nights, a lot of different, honestly, great gatherings. And then also sort of more passive use of the space. So just kind of gatherings, making use of the hammocks and things like that. I do want to note, so the ARPA timeline that funded this project is the time ends at the end of September. So that's when funds need to be spent. So Culture House is going to be winding down their engagement or sort of like their on-site management after September 8th. So within the next couple of weeks. I do want to note the site is going to remain publicly accessible until a direction for long-term development is determined, or if there's another reason that it needs to close, but kind of the goal here being to retain this as a space. So people can still host events here if they get a public event license, similar to the way they would for another public space. Hopefully people still, sit at the furniture, bring art. I've really loved seeing the art that's slowly been accumulating on this space. We're going to be adding some new signage. So those wooden signs that are there now that talk a bit about the pop-up, we're going to be replacing these to talk a bit about, what the space will be in the interim period before longer term development. But the main thing I do want to note with that transition is also that because we can't continue to use funds from the program after September, any of the infrastructure on site now that's rented can't be kept on site. So this is the main pieces here are the bathrooms, the generator, and then also the scaffolding structure with the scrim that sort of shapes the eastern portion of the site. Those are each rented. So I know that's going to change the feel a bit. We've been discussing with Culture House sort of some potential final design interventions, like a mural or sort of like alternative hammock structures or things like that, to try to make the space feel more inviting and usable without the scaffolding. So still exploring those options. And then Culture House is also going to be working this month on finalizing a report on learnings from the space, which they'll come also join us at the September meeting. But Rishika Dewan, who's the community manager, is that the correct title, Rishika? Sorry, close. It's here from Culture House to talk about the engagement. So I'll pass things over to her to kind of give more detail.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a senior community manager, but semantics, it's fine. But yeah, thank you for having me. I have a little presentation. Ben, could I get access?
Yeah, let me give you the capability. Okay, you should be able to now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it's been almost 3 months now, being on that site, and it's been, I think, definitely like a learning experience for us over the last 3 months, really working through a lot of amazing events, how to use that space. I think we've really maximized what we could have done programming wise on the site, and really also working through the heat. It's been really hot, so also hearing from community members about wanting more shade structures. We have put 2 large shade structures on the site as well, and we have had some issues with rain and the storms breaking some of the umbrellas, but we're replacing those as well as we can. So 2 new umbrellas will be coming in next week, but really just working through everything we could with the site to make it usable, but it really hasn't stopped people from using the site. But so just a little bit about what's been happening. So far, as you know, we do have staff on the site at certain hours of the day and during the week, and these are discounted visitors, have been 3,421 so far, which is really exciting. And these are only from when we've had staff on site. So when there isn't staff, not sure how many more people are using the space, but we'll be working on that to also kind of look at our data and see what we could maybe understand from that of, you know, how are people using the space outside of this. Of course, the Saturdays with the beer gardens and the markets have been really popular. Every Saturday we get between 400 to 700 people on that site throughout the day, which is really exciting. Lots of kids. Whenever the beer garden closes, there is so much chalk art on the asphalt, which has been really fun. But really people just making the space their own. You know, we needed to increase the area for people to sit. We moved things around and worked with both the breweries to do that. But yeah, been really fun. In total so far, we've hosted 56 events on that site. And we also have surveys on that site. I will say this data is very is just from the number of surveys that we've got, which is about 35 so far. We're really pushing it this week. Because it is also our last week there to really get people to fill out those surveys. But from those surveys, we've got 26.5% are Gilman Square residents. And then if I remember correctly, we do also have a lot of people from like East Somerville, and from identifying as Winter Hill also coming in. So a lot of like nearby neighborhoods using the space. We are seeing that when we have programming and events on the site, it's a lot more people that come from all over Somerville and outside of Somerville. But when there's no programming, it's a lot of residents just walking by, looking for a place to hang out for a bit, sitting on the hammocks and coming in to meet one another or yeah, be on the site. So that's kind of the balance of like programming versus when there isn't any. 44% of the visitors so far have been walking to the pop-up. 56% of visitors have been spending more than an hour at the pop-up. So really seeing people mostly coming in for programming. And then 64% of people think that this is a positive change in the neighborhood, which is really great to see. A lot of feedback on just really, you know, loving that there's a lot of color in the neighborhood, kind of seeing that space just active, seeing people on the site. Yeah, just everyone has been really excited, whoever comes by the space. Just some fun stories. In general, the public bathrooms have been very popular. I think this is generally something that we see in our work also, is just that having access to a public bathroom has been really great, but it also just brings people on the site. So they use the bathroom, but then they'll sit on the hammocks and they hang out for a while. The hammocks have been really, really great. People just love sitting there. We have like regular people who come in the afternoon just to like sleep for a while, and then, you know, head out and do whatever they have to do for the day. But those have been, it's been a really fun addition. You see kids coming in and trying to like swing on the hammocks too. So it's been really exciting. And yeah, we've seen parents with little kids who come onto the site. Of course, they have mentioned, because it is open to the road, it is they feel a little unsafe, but a lot of kids coming by, they'll play cornhole for like a little bit. We have a bunch of board games. They'll come and sit on the tables and play for a while, and then you know, walk away from the site. We're also seeing on the asphalt just like people using it to walk their dogs. We see kids trying to bike over the asphalt, and that's been great. Seeing people kind of doing like run classes and kind of running through the site as well. So really seeing people use the site in a variety of ways. Haven't included this, but we've done a lot of programming on the site, like Ben mentioned. You know, the markets and the beer gardens. On top of that, we've done art workshops. We've had performances. Oh God, sorry. Don't know why that happened. We've had a lot of performances on the site. We've had some people doing like nature walks in Somerville and decided to make this as a pit stop. We've had a lot of fitness classes on the site. And what else? Open mics, lots of music. And it's been going really well. So a lot of people show up, and it's been really great. And I know Ben gave a little bit about what's coming up, but next week is the last week of us at the pop-up. Programming is going to stop on the 8th. So we have a beer garden this weekend, and we have our last beer garden next weekend, and a lot of music and a lot of stuff happening over the week as well. So definitely stop by if you haven't yet, or if you know a neighbor who hasn't been there yet, definitely ask people to come by. And like Ben mentioned, we're working on a report of what we've learned from the community, just to learn from the space as well. We've had people collecting data observationally, like how are people using the space, what are people saying about the space. We have the surveys out as well. We're going to do a little push for the surveys as well, trying to share it out through different community groups to try and see if we can get people to get more responses to them. And then just generally deinstall, like Ben mentioned, the ARPA funding for this project ends out at the end of September. We will, pretty much the week after the 8th is when we'll be working to take down the scaffolding. So a lot of things will start coming down, but we've worked with Bob, who is the artist of all these amazing sculptures that are up there. And he is really excited to kind of move these things to the fence and keep things up there. We are working right now to work with some mural artists with some budget that we have left, of trying to see if someone can kind of bring that color that the scaffolding brought and bring it onto the asphalt. We're also looking at structures, since everyone really loved those hammocks. We really want to see how we can keep them there. So we're looking for some freestanding structures that can keep the hammocks there as well. But yeah, that's kind of the update so far. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Rishika. Yeah, so I think just the points to stress again, space is going to be staying publicly accessible, as Rishika and I both just mentioned. So the scaffolding, the generator, the bathrooms being removed, but exploring any final design interventions. Curious to also hear from CAC members, though. I know we're going to have like one more month to kind of come back together and hear sort of that final report and what we've learned, but curious to people have any questions now or any thoughts about, like, as we're having sort of those design consideration conversations, if there's anything people want to make sure is added.
I have a question for Rishika. I was wondering, you said the 44% of the people walk there. I'm curious, do you know whether, are people driving there, or are they coming on bikes or taking the bus, or what?
Yeah, we have asked that question. And we've asked like all modes of transportation. Mostly people are walking and then biking. So those are the two main that we're seeing. And then maybe 2 or 3 people who like, and we're mostly seeing from people who don't live in like Somerville and are coming specifically for events. Those are the people who are driving.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Okay.
mostly walking and biking.
Cool. All right. Thanks.
Well, we have a T now too, so, right? They're arriving by T. Yeah.
That's true. We have a train. Yeah.
Ben.
Thanks, Ben Elgard. I was wondering, all these numbers sound exciting, but that is without a baseline for what we should be expecting for this type of activation. When the final report comes out, is it going to be kind of normed for either for what is expected for this site or what is seen at other sites in Somerville, or, you know, comparable places? Is that something going to be in the report?
Ben, do you want to?
I guess we haven't talked about like having comparable numbers from other sites in Somerville, just because we haven't, at least from the city's end, we haven't collected this data before. I'm curious, Rishika, if y'all have used similar, I know that this is like the first outdoor space, but if you've used similar stats for other spaces that it would make sense to compare with. But otherwise, Ben, I think it's been more, I know it's always helpful to have a comparison point, but I think even having some of those numbers themselves is helpful. Barishka, I'm curious if there's any comparison from other sites.
Yeah, yeah, we can I can look into this, but for us, we have mostly more experience in Somerville doing indoor spaces. So those are a little bit different, but we could look at, because we've done one in Union Square and one in East Somerville as community spaces, and we could look at matching those up and seeing other interventions in Somerville. I know Davis also does kind of a lot of big markets and kind of see if we could match those up, but yeah, I can think on that.
Yeah,
That's
we don't.
exciting. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say is it'd be exciting if those help explain what we're seeing. I think that would be very valuable. If all we end up is with recommendations for hammocks, I'm also okay with that. Hammocks are lovely, but I think it just might help because I know that sometimes that's what it takes to move levers in the city.
Yeah, it would be interesting if like, I don't know that this city, from my understanding, like asks questions like this of like other parks or something like that as a comparable space. But I'm also gonna reach out to our summer stat team to see if there's anything that we could compare this with. Also, summer stat, for anyone who doesn't know, is like the data team for the city. Any other thoughts or questions?
I guess I'm wondering, is there, I know you sent around the budget for this project. Are there, and you mentioned getting like permanent frames or something for hammocks. Is there some leftover budget that can be spent to buy these kind of more permanent things that can be left there? Or is that?
Yeah,
Or
there's not a ton. There's like a
assumed
couple
up?
thousand, or like a
Mhm.
few thousand left. And so I know Rishika mentioned we're kind of exploring doing a mural option to have something nice on the asphalt that would feel inviting into the space, but obviously trying to be aware of like, okay, the hammocks have been really popular, like costing out how much it would be to add some infrastructure for something like that. Shade has obviously come up repeatedly with this site. And so also thinking
Mhm.
about, is what the best investment of using those last few $1,000s for sort of more semi-permanent pieces that could last, could potentially last for a year or two. Cool. Yeah, and I mean, if people do have any other thoughts that you think of after, please feel welcome to email me. I can share with Rishka. Jamie?
Oh, I did think of something. I was wondering, I think it's been, well, I don't know, I'll say and personally enjoyed a bunch of the stuff going on at the park. I think there's been like a bit of, I don't know, maybe like clunkiness with like updates on what's happening for people that are interested in attending. Obviously, there's a website and a code and stuff like that, but it can be a little tricky to like navigate through the website. And then I know there was like one event that was rained out, and I and some others were trying to find out like live time, like what was happening, and it was kind of tricky to know if like programming was still on or off, like in the moment.
Yeah, Rishik, I don't know if you want to add more detail on that. I know that the Instagram gets used often for like if something is getting rained out. I've seen them post stories, just like with that specific event once the call is made. Sometimes I know, like I went to a movie night where the call was, we saw the storm rolling in, so I know the call was made like 20 minutes before. But Rishik, I don't know if there's other detail on that.
Yeah, no, I do apologize for that. We do like put it up on our story, and then we have also yeah, we will put it up on the website also, just listing that it's been canceled. It has been, with navigating the weather, it's been a lot of like last minute calls because we want to support the artists and creatives in what they're doing. So really kind of pushing it to the end of like making a call. So I do apologize, but we can um we can yeah, I can work. I know we only have 1 week left, but I can just make sure that I can kind of share that information with Ben as well, of like what's the best way of different ideas and ways that we can update people and what might be happening on the site too.
I do just want to, I mean, people have commented on it a bit, but I do want to kind of ask explicitly. Like, I think the idea of a mural has stood out as, something that from the beginning would have been like we've talked about would be nice to add to the space. So that's sort of where our thoughts have been going. But if there, yeah, are there other? How do people feel about the idea of a mural, or like, are there other pieces of infrastructure that stand out that again like aren't particularly expensive, but that seem like they would be, particularly useful? Like, is it adding a couple more shade structures or?
I think that, yeah, something for shade or rain cover could be nice. Like having been there on some of the rather hot days, and it's good to have some shade for sure, but it's, yeah, when you really want it, it's surprising how little space there you find yourself with. So I could see improvement for that if needed.
I mean, I would think where there's a seat and a table, people will sit and have food. So I don't know, permanent like picnic tables and benches could be put there for people who don't often get access to outdoor patio space to eat lunch or something.
Yeah, and I will say that I know they're like not as heavy as the usual picnic bench, but the benches and like tables that are there now in sort of the beer garden space, those are gonna stay on site, and as well the cafe
Oh,
tables. So the furniture that's there now, and then like the chairs that are set up like with the mats, those will also be staying on site.
Great.
Yeah, Ben.
One other thing that might be great for the report is I'm sure that because this is the first of its kind of an outdoor site being activated and being very closely monitored to see what is successful, it might be nice to know what is generally good practice that we saw that was able to be observed and that could apply elsewhere in Somerville versus what was specific to this site that really is special for this community. And I bring that up because, one of the nice part, like I know many people have wonderful stories of experiences this last season, and so it just by that measure alone, it was a success. But to see that it could both help further activate the space in the future, or that we could also figure out, how else can Somerville benefit, it's a real asset. So I think a report that could do that would be really wonderful.
Any other thoughts before we let Rishka have the rest of her evening?
I haven't talked much, but I just wanted to say I didn't have the chance to attend as many events as I'd hoped, but the ones I did attend were lovely, and just wanted to say thank you for that.
Yeah, huge props to Culture House for supporting so much. Huge props to also like all of the community members that have taken the initiative to start events. I've seen a lot of people wanting to bring a lot of really cool groups and gatherings to the space, so that's been really great. Cool. All right, thank you for joining, Rishika.
Thank you. Bye.
With that, I'm going to shift us into our next substantive item, which is the letter to the SRA. So give me a second to pull up the draft document that I sent around. Okay, again, can people see this? Amazing. So yeah, so just gonna, again, I know everyone on here is aware of why we're discussing this, but just giving some context for the reporting. So for the last couple of meetings, we've been having discussions of the potential use of urban renewal in this area. One of the roles of the Civic Advisory Committee is to advise on the potential use of urban renewal at the mobile station at 360 Medford Street at the intersection of School and Medford Streets, because there's been considerations of joint development of that mobile station with the Homans Lot. And so urban renewal has been seen as one potential tool for achieving that. And so Civic Advisory Committee members had expressed interest in sort of expressing to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority, which is the entity in Somerville that makes decisions around urban renewal, interest in sort of, having more discussion around and potentially making a decision to go down the path of exploring urban renewal. Though we've talked a bit about, what the goals and benefits of that path would be, and also that there are sort of other strategies for potentially achieving the goal. So just trying to have that all summarized within a letter. So hopefully people had a chance to review this. I structured it to kind of give it some context to the sort of planning in Gilman in general, sort of some refreshers on the role of the Civic Advisory Committee specifically for SRA members, and then sort of laying out those options forward. And again, this was sort of a best initial effort at summarizing the thoughts that I had been hearing, but would love to, like, essentially, I would love to structure this as being able to kind of live edit this together for a bit. So if anybody has, changes they want to make to the document, or anything that they want to add, we don't necessarily have to get the exact text tonight. When I've seen these kind of live done in the past, I think generally can take some notes, and then I can incorporate those notes over the next month and sort of finalize at our next meeting and then send to the SRA. If that works for everyone. Jennifer.
If we're going to live edit this, could you increase the
Absolutely.
screen size a little bit? Oh, thank you.
Yeah. But even before we sort of, hop into things, how does that process feel for people based on where we were last month? I can only see a couple of faces, so I can see Jennifer's thumbs up, but if other people are sort of emoting, I will ask that people just like unmute and make comment. It's hard to see the grid when I'm sharing screen.
No, it sounds good.
Yes, also sounds good.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a good process, and I read through it and I thought it was a great start. So very clear.
Yeah, so I guess is there anything people would want to add, edit, things that they felt missed the mark? Anything that they want to give more detail on, please just raise your hand and let me know.
I'll start then. I had a few suggestions that are more substantive that I can get into later, but on the bottom of the first page, just like a little nitpicky thing, it introduces those bullet points by saying it's talking about city-owned holdings, but then it mentions the mobile station, and that's not really city-owned,
Yeah.
right? So maybe we just kind of rephrase that so that talking about the city-owned and the adjacent mobile parcel, which is big part of the official sites that we're considering as a CAC, right? But it's not a city-owned site.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just going to make notes for now and highlight them in red just to show what we've changed during that conversation.
And when you talk about the Homans lot, do you want to mention this summer activation pop-up space?
Yeah.
Ben, I was wondering if we could also add some of the history before the Civic Advisory Committee started. I know you have the part around the plan from 2014, but there were initiatives
Definitely.
with the Gilman Square when it was a neighborhood association in between. I think that might help just establish the multiple attempts at articulating a vision. And I wish I was the right person to have all those details, but it'd probably be Christine who is the right person to talk to about that. Christine.
And I mean, I have some of the context, and so I think I'll try to make an initial draft, and then I'll probably just note any change text for the next version in red. And then when I share it out for the next CAC meeting, Ben, I can either forward it to Christine, or if you want to note it for her and make sure that, somebody else from the GSNC also looks it over.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think that does help to give a sense of like the longevity of the planning efforts. Are there
Um,
any other like, oh yeah,
sorry.
please.
Speaking of effort, I know that there's been other complementary efforts. You kind of allude to that with the addressing neighborhood flooding. But there were other aspects of coordination around the streetscape or activating the bridge
Mhm.
by closing it off. I don't know how much of that makes sense to include, but both of those are important efforts. I'd love to continue to talk about them. If there's a way we can speak to it here, I think that might be great.
Yeah, I can at least make reference. It is like a balancing act of, you know, the main ask in the
Sure.
letter. But I can definitely at least have like a sentence on each of these.
Thanks. Yeah, I like to have it included just because even the idea of like green space, how does it complement other initiatives? I think it kind of speaks to the balancing act that you know, if we want to make sure the site activation does some of it and the rest of the spaces can do other parts.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think it's also helpful for people to like always be thinking of the Homeland's Law and the process around it as like both being influenced by but influencing. Like the streetscape work is obviously closely tied to what happens on the Homeland's Law, and so can you kind of more specifically articulate why?
Yeah.
Are there any other like edits specifically, like when Diana mentioned it wasn't nitpicky? I think that's a good thing to note, like things like that feel maybe like slightly inaccurate or like even just like wording things, and then we can kind of focus more on more things we would add.
I had a couple points that I thought we should mention in the, like, scrolling down a little bit, the section of bullets about the kinds of things that we heard as a CAC from talking to the community. Like the no hill route from Medford up to the station. I think I thought it would be helpful to clarify that the idea of an elevator or escalator is that it would be publicly accessible, but like included in a future development potentially, because otherwise I think it's very expensive to think that like the city is going to build an elevator or something. But if it can be integrated into future, you know, creative development on the site, then I think that's more likely to happen. And so by helping to ensure some kind of transformation of the site, you know, we could meet a lot of these different goals, like being able to create a route up to the train station, and then, you know, more open space and hangout locations.
Yeah, so I can think about adding something that's specifically about the sort of elevator escalator, like physical component to potentially having that sort of crossing, but just in general, the fact that development, where we often talk about like achieving benefits in this area through development.
Right. Yeah. And then about hangout spaces, I know we heard a lot from teenagers at the high school about specifically, I know you say all ages, open spaces for all ages, but I think specifically there's a need for hangout space for teenagers here, and maybe we want to mention that.
Ben,
Yes.
so just to be clear, so the intent of this letter is what exactly? Because I think that dictates what you put in there. Because if we were trying to make like a case to the SRA to adopt an urban renewal plan, you know, I can think of, I mean, yeah, you want to put everything in there that indicates, you know, what this would mean for the area, if we were to include, you know, other parcels outside of the Homans, you know, based on the locations, proximity to City Hall and Civic, you know, basically Civic Center essentially up there, as well as the train station. And then of course, like Ben's, I mean, there's been efforts like community efforts that, you know, we've had a pro bono like design firm, like design a whole, you know, whatever. There's been a lot of interest, community interest in Gilman Square. And yeah, so I don't know. I just, it depends on what exactly we're trying to achieve with this letter.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to take a moment to kind of try to articulate that as a group, like what would, I think in my mind, the way that we spoke about it last time, it's like to put forward to the SRA. I mean, one, it's important just to kind of like summarize, you know, the work that the city has been doing in the context. And so, yeah, I think if there are important points like that, there is the balancing of not making it too long necessarily in the letter. But if there are like very key points, definitely can make sure that we have them in here. But then I think the way that this conversation initially started was just like having the SRA have more of a discussion around urban renewal and whether or not it's like a path that they would consider moving forward with at this point, and then like giving staff the go ahead to start doing some more of that engagement work that happens with urban renewal versus, you know, and I note this in sort of like the potential paths forward thing, but if it's something that they would not encourage moving forward with at this point, that at least like making that determination.
But so just in the process though, so you're saying once they sort of indicated, you know, that a positive indication, so staff would do the report I'm talking about then.
That includes like, yeah, so staff would do like more.
Do the report that goes to the state, like staff, SRA
yeah,
itself,
the staff create that.
making the case essentially to the state.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But riffing off of that, though, I do think it'd be great if we included here in these very high level summary bullet points. I mean, right now it does address some of the goals of a plan, or why we would want to implement a plan. I also think it'd be great. One aspect that isn't here is the things that a local developer couldn't do on their own. So, for instance, I think there was some conversation of community space or nonprofit at like space, or even government like city hall satellite space that could be more accessible for commuters. That kind of thinking that came out of the RISD lab exercise, I think was really valuable because that's stuff that doesn't otherwise happen when it's not coordinated. So I think getting some amount of that into those bullet points could be really helpful to kind of show the breadth of thinking.
Well, I guess, so when you say that a developer couldn't do on their own, do you mean like that require both the Homans law and the mobile station being developed together?
A bit of that, and then also would require some kind of community benefits, either a pretty elaborate community benefits agreement, or would require like stipulations under an RFP.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Well, so I can add that, but I will say that I don't know that necessarily would have to go through the SRA. So it could still be, you know, important context to have, but like if we ended up going the route where urban renewal was not the tool used, but we still did an RFP process just through the city, which obviously the CAC would still be involved in. And that could still be an RFP that, like, if we're, you know, doing the option that encourages somebody who is responding to the RFP to also purchase the mobile station, we could still kind of have those stipulations there.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's just a different bullet point than supporting and complementing just local businesses, right? Because it touches kind of the other activities that we want to reinforce in this nexus point. The other thing that I think could maybe also get added, maybe very briefly, but I know there is a statement just in that paragraph that introduces the bullet points. Once the CAC was formed, CAC members and city staff conducted additional engagement. That was not trivial engagement. Like I almost feel like by not breaking out the ways that minority populations were targeted to make sure their needs were documented, like that should carry a lot of weight, I think, to really say that this was, hard hitting, comprehensive thinking. So if there's a way to include some of that, I think that'd be great.
I can add a sentence on that. And Rachel will have like a lot more of that context because obviously she was super deeply involved at that time. Cool. Jamie, I know your hand's been up for a bit.
Yes, kind of just like bigger picture, but the just maybe like a more honed in like graphic of like just a
Sure.
specific parcel that we're talking about. I know the one on the last page is a bit of like this is the whole area, but I found it a little less relevant to the like argument being made in the letter.
No, that's a great point. I don't know when I switched from not having everything caps to having everything caps, but I will figure that out. Yeah, I can
Looks like
definitely.
you're
add
really
graphics like that.
serious about what you're
Yeah.
saying, so.
Diana.
Yeah, in that, the paragraph on the top of the next page, I guess after that bullet list, I think you kind of make these points already, but I think they're really important to say more. Like I think we all agree that some of the major benefits for having the mobile site included is that, number one, as you say, we're not going to have a gas station next to what is hopefully going to be a very nice pedestrian friendly, mixed use development with open space and everything, but also just to have a more efficient development parcel for the city to put out to bid and therefore hopefully be more inviting to potential developers, and would also allow them to have more land area to fit creative solutions. And then by having that larger area, maybe they're more likely to provide some of these community benefits and things that Ben was talking about, like the community spaces inside the buildings or extra city satellite offices or open space and things like that. So it's both not having a gas station there and then having a more efficient site for that would be more inviting to developers, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And then in the paragraph after that, I thought when you're talking about the delay because the city's doing this disposition study, maybe we should also mention the Winter Hill School and the fact that, I mean, that's kind of maybe what started off a disposition study, right? But the need to find a potential site for the school or a construction staging area. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's not relevant to deciding whether or not to do redevelopment here, but.
I can see if it makes sense, maybe here or like in the earlier, like when the disposition study is first mentioned. Well, actually, maybe this is where it's first mentioned. Just like adding reference to the fact that that study is partially responding to the Winter Hill incident. Yeah, and the fact that that like came up in conversations at the CAC specifically at the time.
Ben, but I don't want to get confused. So I think the I don't know, I'm trying to remember if there was two disposition studies. One was just the city's disposition study on all of their property, buildings or or land that were, available for whatever. And then I thought there was like also a feasibility study for the schools and where they could go. I don't know.
Oh, sure.
I'm
Yeah,
not sure
I
if they're
can-
one and the same. I think the disposition study was a city disposition study regarding all of our assets, including the coming school, like buildings that are offline, that aren't. Yeah.
Yeah, and then parcels like Homans. Yeah, so those are two separate things. So this is the feasibility study around I don't know the specific document that came out around the Winter Hill School. I know that there's also like there are other school documents that are out right now, but the disposition study are like coming up with that strategy for disposition of underutilized city parcels. That's a separate document. But I think what Diana was referencing is part of the impetus for the conversations that led to the disposition study was like the questions that we were asking ourselves around the Homans lot and how it was going to be needed to respond to the Winter Hill School incident, and like whether this is going to be the space for the school or whether this was going to be a space for construction laydown, like that was one of the factors that kind of led to, you know, needing to have this citywide more strategic vision of how we're using our underutilized parcels.
Right.
And that had come up in some of the CAC meetings where, you know, right after we had received the lot back from the MBTA, and there was kind of, you know, a renewed interest in exploring an RFP, like why that was being stalled at the time. Jennifer.
Sure. Going back to that prior paragraph about the not wanting to have the mobile station there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember that when we were talking to the community, everybody, the consensus seemed to be that the gas station element of it was not remotely as important to the neighborhood as the convenience store aspect of it. And that if we can highlight that, like we're not trying to preserve a gas station, we are trying to preserve access to quick groceries or essential needs or things in a convenience store, and that one of the possibilities for that space could be to provide a better version of that. I don't know how to phrase that, but just the idea, like it's, you know, to avoid an outcome in which a gas station is located directly adjacent to the MBTA station. Right, that it's.
Sorry, I'm just trying to make sense of it, but I realize it gets distracting when I'm typing it.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, so nuance to the fact that it's not just like not wanting that site there anymore. The gas station is what people are less interested in, but there is still like an interest in enhancing the food option that the mobile market currently offers.
Exactly, right. Like it's not, it would be an opportunity to increase the benefits of providing that space for that reason if it's part of that larger parcel. Like there'd be more flexibility to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything in like the planning context anything else that people want me to add before maybe we talk about the sort of potential options piece?
I had one other
Yeah.
point in that paragraph. I thought maybe we could also mention that another impetus of wanting to start evaluating urban renewal now is that not only are we waiting, we want to get it done so that when the city's done with the disposition site, we'll also have more of a decision about urban renewal, but I mean, at least for me, I think like the market right now for real estate construction has been really terrible because of interest rates and everything. But if it's going to turn around and there's going to be all this extra interest all of a sudden from developers and more ability for them to do things like affordable housing and provide retail and things like that because of a stronger market, then we want to be able to be ready to have a RFP go out during that market and not, you know, have it take so long that we're in another recession or something, and then there won't be any interest in the site. So just, you know, getting ready quickly so that we're ready to do something with the site.
Yeah, I can add that. I have some language around that from the presentation from last November that I can pull from. Okay. In terms of the potential options piece, so as I mentioned, like I think what this letter will really spark is for the SRA to like start to have their conversation about this. So I think I didn't word the options here super strongly and have kind of talked about the fact that we have discussed how we're, starting to have that conversation and pursue like exploring urban renewal more formally through the SRA can, lead to multiple outcomes, and that people are generally aware of that. So these aren't worded like super strongly, but is there any sort of detail that people want to add into this, or things they want to talk about of like their own understanding?
I just wanted to say that I appreciate that it puts into writing the idea that even if we start this process and even if we, see it forward again and again, that there is always the opportunity to stop short at some point, and that the work is beneficial regardless of the ultimate decision around urban renewal and eminent domain. So I appreciate that all that's in there.
Any other thoughts, notes, or, I mean, this gives me a lot of kind of good stuff to add to the context. Like I mentioned, so I will draft those edits and show them in like red text or blue text or something, for then sending a version for next time. And then hopefully at that point, there's, no fewer substantive changes, or if there's anything else we want to tweak with wording, we can do that also live in that meeting. And then from there, it could send it to the SRA. Ben?
One question I had is, does it make any sense to?
You are, sorry, Ben, it's a little quiet.
Okay, sorry. Is that
better.
bad?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering, one of the things that did come up is that this kind of explains the cost of choosing a direction. It doesn't say anything about not choosing any direction. Like there's a need to demonstrate the city's commitment to moving forward, whatever forward looks like, right? The city has demonstrated a commitment to the process as a whole by forming CAC, but not by but right now that has some ambiguity because there's no outcome yet, right? So I wonder if there's any need just to speak to like an impetus to kind of wrap up the stage because we want to move on and move forward. And because right now there is a good explanation of what the options are, but kind of not like why now.
Yeah, I guess do we want to talk a little more about sort of like that why now piece of it? So one thing I do want to know is obviously the SRA like operates closely with the city, but it is a separate entity. And so I think they definitely, they also like they have a close relation. There's a close way in which they are meant to work with the CAC, and they have a lot of like respect for community wishes in the same way that the city would. But they do operate somewhat independently. I don't think that means that it doesn't make sense to include something of the why now and like sort of that, like, because there could also be a piece of this that like I know, people have had frustrations around the speed at which things have moved or like the challenges that have come up. And so I don't know that it's necessarily like a frustrations piece, but just kind of like talking about the urgency in some way. I think that does still make sense. I'm just curious if there are any specific parts of that people want to make sure I include.
Personally, I was thinking the why now for the market, not the why now for us who are engaged in the process.
Gotcha.
Should there be like an option 3 of like, if we do nothing, then what happens? Like some new operator buys the gas station and says, great, I'm going to run a gas station here for 20 years or something. I mean, I don't know if we want to talk about.
Yeah, I had drafted some.
No action option.
I had drafted something around that initially and didn't have it, partially because, so I think again, I know like the ask here is sort of around having the SRA decide if it's a channel that they want to go down. I guess like they could decide ultimately, like, we don't even want to really be discussing this topic. But I would expect that, you know, in response to a letter like this, they would at least want to give some indication of like, yes, we're willing to pursue this as an option, or no, we don't think that like this area meets requirements of blight or other reasons that they might have for saying like this is not something we're going to pursue at this time. But I can also have like a don't make a decision on it option. I don't know if the don't make a decision on it option is very different from like the do nothing that you were just describing is more of like deciding not to use urban renewal versus like do nothing as in not making a decision. I know it's sort of like a small distinction there, but
I actually think that it's better to make a decision, even if it means no urban renewal, because at least other players know that we're, I mean, and this is maybe not for the SRA, but for other operators in the community, for instance, other developers, they either know the city is planning a go or no go, right? And right now they don't know what we're thinking. It's like an open, it's open, but the book isn't closed, right? On the matter. Not even the city's intention. And so I think that's where, you know, maybe the SRA doesn't care, but we should care. So I'm just wondering how much of that we, you know, is important.
yeah, I guess I had tried to capture that in this last sentence where like it might be that they decide through this conversation that this is not an appropriate tool at this site. I will say I've never, and like this is something I want to articulate now, is I've never necessarily seen, granted I'm not like maybe this is something that could happen, but I don't know that the SRA would necessarily ever make a recommendation that like, or say definitively like we are definitely not using urban renewal in this area. It's more like indicating that this is not a tool we're interested in using at this time, but I don't necessarily know that it will lead to something binding, but it can at least give sort of an indication about how the SRA is feeling about this, and if urban renewal is not something that they think would be appropriate here for the, just like that it wouldn't be an appropriate tool to achieve the goals here. So just want to articulate that in terms of like what the expectation is.
That may be sufficient then.
Yeah, if people have other thoughts on this again in the next month, we can maybe like add some sentences at that next session. And then I'll probably, I don't have it on here now, but I will probably actually list the names of SRA member of Civic Advisory Committee members, just so that it's like shown who contributed to drafting the letter. Diana.
I think part of the urgency that is maybe not in here really is just like this site is so incredibly important and valuable being right next to the T station, both the Holman site and the mobile station. And we want to make sure that we get the best, we make the best possible development here that's going to benefit the neighborhood, and, you know, taking proactive steps to do that now, because it's not a, whatever a usual site is, it's not a usual site. It's right next to the train. So very important. And the bike path.
Yeah, I can add that urgency, both like the geographic urgency and sort of like the why now.
Yeah. And
I was gonna say Jennifer. Oh, yeah, Diane.
Sorry, one other final comment on that. The second option of like not doing urban renewal, you mentioned in that paragraph, adding that another option would be having financial or time-based incentives to encourage the development of both parcels. And I think also other options might, I mean, maybe you mean this by I'm not sure what you mean by financial incentives, but if there's like a density bonus or height bonus or something, if
yeah, I was thinking of that as,
yeah, includes
sorry,
both parcels, then, you know, I don't know if you need to spell that out or not, but just so it's more clear to the SRA what the other option is.
yeah, and I don't know that we've gotten super into detail of thinking what those could be, and I think that's something with like the real estate advisor for the city, but I think thinking of a density bonus obviously is like helping the project achieve more gain, so thinking of that as maybe a financial bonus, or if there ends up being, you know, we haven't talked about through the RFP process, like if there would still be a cost to the land, or like how much that would be discounted based on the benefits that people want to receive. And so
Right.
if there's like an additional discount or something like that. So I kind of just left it general, but I can add more detail if it feels like it would be helpful.
And the time-based incentives are about like expiration of urban renewal or
So
powers or something?
the
Or
time-based incentives are about exploration of purchasing the lot. And so sometimes what can be difficult is if an RFP is set up in such a way that like a recipient needs to be chosen that then doesn't allow for exploring purchase of another parcel. So if somebody was responding to the RFP and they were interested in purchasing the mobile station, but that like took some time to have that negotiation, that like allowing that time to play out. And that was actually came from the recommendation of like the first time that this came up at the SRA. Christine Stone, who's an SRA member, had referenced that as another potential strategy.
Okay, yeah, all right, thanks.
So I'm not seeing any other hands for now. So I think that gives me great material to work off of to edit for next time. And like I said, if people think of anything else that they want me to add, please feel welcome to send over notes and I can incorporate that in. And then I'll note any text that's changed from this version to the next version so that we can all review together. Now pull back up the presentation. So with that, I'm going to shift into our fifth item, which is neighborhood updates from Civic Advisory Committee members. I'm going to make two quickly, or one of these is probably more Ben's to make, but just have it on here. So one, I'll note that this coming Saturday, August 31st from 3 to 3:30 p.m., myself and one of my colleagues, and then representatives from Culture House are going to do a presentation for the like placemaking group for the Boston Society of Architects. So it's going to be very informal, just like a small presentation about like how the project started. And then Culture House is going to talk more about like the design considerations and what the work has been like to support programming, and then kind of just answer questions about the space. But it's been great to see an interest from the group. And then also, again, I'll let Ben give more detail on this, but the Gilman Square Neighborhood Council's annual Gilman Arts and Culture Festival is occurring on September 14th from 12 to 5. And this is on Pearl Street between Marshall and James Street. I'm sure most people on the call have heard that this is happening. Ben, is there any detail you want to add about this?
There's already the music lineup from 12 to 5. And also there's tabling from local artists. We also it's probably just worth mentioning that it's put on both in collaboration with support from the Mass Cultural Council and Somerville Arts Council and local businesses, of course. Yeah, should be exciting.
Quick question on that event. Wait, no, never mind. I've answered my own question. Ignore me.
No worries. Is there anything else that people want to make an announcement about?
I haven't read about it enough, but there's this weird thing with the central library now where it's closing like during school hours in the middle of weekday afternoons for like 2 hours so that teenagers can use the whole library or something. So
I just saw that on Instagram. I hadn't heard any other detail about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's not for the teenagers. It's to prevent the teenagers from entering the library because there's been a number of disruptions and apparently threats on to other patrons and to the librarians.
Okay.
So as a safety measure, they're just closing the library for that short window when school is let out.
Or indefinitely, I guess, until they find another solution, or?
Yeah, it wasn't quite clear whether it's indefinite or just at the beginning of the school year.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, I also need to find out more about this.
If you do Google, there's a Reddit where someone apparently someone wrote up a little bit about it. Just FYI.
I mean, there isn't much more to know. There was a GBH article you can go, just ran today. You might hear it on the radio, or you can just Google the so there's no chat here, so I can't put the link in the chat, but Somerville Library GBH.
Anything else people want to add? With that, I can shift us. Well, I guess we have one more public comment period, but that there are no members of the public in attendance. So I think we are okay to skip this. I guess beyond updates, is there anything else though that any SRM member wants to add before we adjourn? Otherwise, then I'm sure I will see many of you at the Gilman Square Arts and Culture Festival on the 14th. Sounds good. Thank you all for taking the time tonight.
All right.
Great.
We
Thank
are
you.
adjourned. Thanks, Ben.
Bye all.